Welcome, everyone. My name is Scott Appleby, and I'm the Marilyn Keough Dean of the Keough School of Global Affairs. I'm coming to you live from the Rex and Alice A. Martin Media Center on the Notre Dame campus, and I'm delighted that you have joined us for what is certain to be a lively second installment of the Industry Insights series. We are honored to have with us this evening two public servants of great distinction. Capping 2 decades spent representing Wisconsin's 1st District in Congress, Paul Ryan served as the 54th Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives from 2015 to 2019. From 2013 to 2017, Denis McDonough served as White House Chief of Staff for President Obama after serving the Obama administration as Deputy National Security Advisor from 2010 to 2013. I have not checked, but I have no doubt that the CVs of these gentlemen, perhaps just below a mention of their decades of government leadership at the highest levels, proudly announce, "I teach at the University of Notre Dame." In addition to engaging Notre Dame students in the social sciences and other disciplines through his teaching and ND classes, Paul Ryan serves on the board of Notre Dame's Wilson Sheehan Lab for Economic Opportunities. Denis McDonough is a professor of the practice and master teacher in the Keough School. So, gentlemen, where else to begin but with the nomination of one of our colleagues on the Notre Dame faculty, Judge Amy Coney Barrett, to the Supreme Court. It seems that the adjective bruising now typically modifies the term confirmation hearings. Do you expect a bruising process? And if so, which political party will come away most bruised on the eve of a presidential election? Let's start with you, Paul Ryan.
Well, and first of all, Scott, good to be with you. Dennis, nice to meet you. No, just kidding. We know each other well. Bruising, I think it's going to be a fast process. Therefore, for Amy's sake, it's not going to be terribly bruising because it's going to be fairly quick. So that's why I think for her sake, it will be better. I think you can analyze this 2 different ways, and I think both sides are going to get something out of this. I think the left is going to get something to galvanize around. The fact that the court could go to a 6-3 court, and I think it will. I think Mitch has the votes to do this, and I think that's going to happen. On our side, what I think pollsters are looking at from the Republican standpoint, especially in Senate races, is what they would anticipate sort of an overreaction or a reaction. People like me say overreaction, but a reaction of the left promising to pack the court or add 2 new states like DC and Puerto Rico as payback. That kind of talk also animates the Republican base, but more importantly, that sort of coveted suburban voter who might want to check on government. That voter right now is the key voter that is trending Biden versus Trump in most polls, like in Wisconsin. But for Senate races, I think the Senate believes that kind of reaction will accrue to the Republican benefit to help get that sort of suburban voter who doesn't want to see a wild swing in government to the left or the right, frankly. So I think it's going to help Republicans generally because we're going to get another judge, a fantastic one, I would say. I know Amy, and I'm a huge fan of hers. But I think it'll also galvanize the left, and I bet Dennis could give you his take on that.
Good. Thanks.
Yeah, it's really great to be with you, Scott. And Mr. Speaker, it's really good to be with you, even though you've got that dreaded Packers helmet behind you there. It's a rough season.
Somebody's got to win. It might as well be us.
It's good.
Minnesota, Dennis.
It's a rough season to be a Vikes fan so far, but hope springs eternal. I also just want to say, Scott, it's a really nice to be here, not only with you and with the speaker, but for you to let a staff guy of much less importance join the discussion here. So thanks for letting me join with the speaker. Look, I think that Judge Coney Barrett is, first of all, the fact that there's a process at all is a considerable change from 4 years ago. You might recall that notwithstanding the fact that we had almost 4 times as much time before the election as we do now, an equally capable, widely regarded judge by the name of Merrick Garland was denied even the courtesy of a hearing. which I think was a unfortunate and unfair, frankly, development. I guess I'd answer your question about the impact of the nomination hearing a little bit differently, because I'm like a national security guy. I don't consider myself a great political expert. But one thing I do sense is that this hearing in a case in the court in the second week of November, which involves the states of California and Texas, really has the future of the Affordable Care Act on the docket. And I think if what happens, as the speaker suggests, is a 6-3 court, I think the Affordable Care Act and its protections, for example, for people with pre-existing conditions, there's, let's say, 125 to 150 million people with such conditions in the country, can no longer count on that protection. And coming as it does at the height of the pandemic, wherein COVID-19 may become the new pre-existing condition, joining diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, as the kinds of things that Americans are now protected, if they have them, to be able to get insurance in the marketplace. If the act gets struck down, then no such protections will be maintained. And I think that would be a mistake, particularly at the height of the pandemic. And so I think that's what you're going to hear Democrats talking about. That happens to have been what appears to be a pretty motivating set of issues for Democrats to be focused on back in 2018. I think the fact that they continue to make that case now into 2020, my guess, as I said, I don't know, but my guess is that ends up being a pretty motivating development in the context of the campaign.
Thanks. You know, it seems certain that both of these topics, Judge Barrett and also the Affordable Care Act and healthcare in general, will be raised in the first presidential debate, which is tomorrow evening, as you know. So let me consult my extensive research notes here for a moment. It says here that one of the three of us shook Joe Biden's hand 20 years ago. One of the three of us worked with him closely for many years in the White House. And one of us ran against him as a vice presidential candidate and debated him on national TV. So I know you'd probably want to hear about my experience shaking his hand 20 years ago, but perhaps we should begin with you, Mr. Speaker. If you would tell us a little bit about the experience of debating Joe Biden, what kind of opponent he was in that debate. What do you expect from him tomorrow night?
Well, first, I started by shaking his hand in the debate. So I, too, got to shake Joe Biden's hand. No, I actually have known Joe a long time. I'm actually personally a fan of his. I think he's a good guy. I disagree with him on most things, but he's a good guy. What happens in these debates is you go into it with your specific strategy. So I had a very specific strategy. He had a very specific strategy. And each of us basically prosecuted our strategies. And that's the conventional way these debates go. For instance, I was then 42 years old. I looked pretty young. Country didn't really know me. So I didn't want to lay sort of a Dan Quayle type egg where Lloyd Benson had this moment against him. So for me, it was demonstrating, acuity, policy acumen, but mostly temperament, and showing that I was wise enough, I had enough gray behind my ears, even though I had none, to do the job. So I had a particular strategy. Joe, Dennis should get me if I'm wrong on this. The week before, Obama had a bad debate against my running mate, Mitt Romney. And these things can sort of get ebbs and flows and cycles. So that was a bad time for the Obama campaign because Mitt in Denver did a very good job against President Obama. And Joe needed to spice things up, animate things, speak to the base. And also, our interpretation was he was going to try and get me to lose my cool, get me to sort of off my game, and then act like an intemperate 42-year-old. And an intemperate 42-year-old debating an intemperate 67-year-old, the 67-year-old's always going to win that. So we sort of assumed he would do that. And so I prosecuted my strategy. He prosecuted his strategy. And frankly, I think both of us kind of got out of it the base case. I didn't lose my cool. He wanted me to lose my cool, so he didn't get that. But I think he got the animation of the base riled up, which was a do-over from the Obama Mitt Romney debate before. And so the point I'm trying to make here is each of us had a coherent, rehearsed, practiced strategy going into the debate, and we prosecuted that strategy with discipline. That I don't think is going to be what this one's going to be like. I think Joe will have a coherent, practiced, rehearsed strategy. You memorize sort of lines for every various, eventuality that comes up. You'll think of some kind of a situation on a certain topic and what your sort of line's going to be as a comeback. The president and Chris Christie's playing Joe Biden. I had Ted Olson as my Joe Biden. Chris Christie, and he had, I think, Chris Van Houten as my Paul Ryan, who Chris and I sparred on a daily basis in the budget committee. He was the ranking member. I was the chairman at the time. Chris Christie's doing Joe Biden with Donald Trump debates, and I think they've had maybe 4, rehearsals at maybe a half hour. I'm just joking about that, but I'll bet you $750 that the president's kind of planning on just doing this one on his own off the cuff. He's just not the kind of guy. He's going to go in with some kind of specific strategy. I think he's got in his mind, I'm going to go after Joe personally. I'm going to defend my record on policy, which, by the way, I think he has a good record to defend on policy by pre-COVID results and the economy and things like that. And then I think he's just going to go after Joe. And that's just probably what I would expect. And I bet Joe probably sees it coming and he'll be better prepared for it because he'll prepare for it. And I think the expectation games was managed really poorly on the Trump side. And so that if Joe Biden says, today is Tuesday and my name is Joe Biden and it's the year 2020, he's going to be declared the winner. Because I think the Trump campaign has so poorly managed the expectations game. They just started a week ago saying, okay, he's been around 47 years. He knows how to do this. He's going to be really good. They just started a week ago. And I think they just did not plan the expectations game very well, frankly.
Very interesting. Dennis, if you were advising Joe Biden as he prepares for this debate, what would you tell him?
Well, Scott, I'd just start by saying I know him pretty well too, and I agree with the speaker that he's a really good guy. I recall when I first started working in the Senate back in 2000, I worked for the Senate Majority Leader at the time. Every time I came home, my dad really wanted to know if he didn't really care much whether, I saw Tom Daschle, who I was working for at the time. He always wanted to know if I got a chance to meet Joe Biden. Because my dad, daily communicating himself, was always going back to the day that the vice president had been introduced to the country in that tragic period. Working guys like my dad really connected with him. And he's a really engaging guy to work with. And it's nice to see that come through. So that's the first thing I'd say. If I were advising him, I'd urge him to be himself for that reason. I'd also urge him to, I know as the speaker mentioned $750. My guess is I know why he said that, but I think the vice president will make mention of the really.
It's just a random number I picked out of thin air.
I figured, yeah. It seems like that might be how the accountants that work for the president came up with it too. But the tax story in the New York Times overnight is pretty remarkable. And I think that will obviously be one that generates some attention in the debate. And I think the vice president will spend some time on the economy. I think, there's polling over the weekend, according to the Washington Post and the New York Times, that the vice president's closing on this issue. I think, generally speaking, presidential races are animated by people's views of the economy. And so I think the vice president will spend some time talking about that. But I really think the most important thing is for him to be himself. I do think that the speaker's right that the president will be geared up. He's pretty feisty character. He understands TV perhaps better than anybody, given that he's a reality TV star himself. So I think he comes in with some pretty substantial benefits and some pretty substantial advantages against the VP. But I think if he's himself, he'll hold his own.
Thank you both. A majority of Americans, recent polls suggest, are concerned about the integrity of the election and about its immediate aftermath. What would you say, if you can say something to reassure them? Do you share these concerns about the election's integrity and what might result in the days and weeks after the election? Dennis, why don't we begin with you?
Sure. I hate to cut the line on the speaker, but I'll give it a shot. Well, look, I think, President happened to work closely with the speaker back in 2016 when we got intelligence about the fact that the Russians were getting involved in that race. I think, a lot has been written about that since. I think the most important thing out of that is we hear a lot of good things from the states and the localities that are in our system in charge of running elections. Even federal elections are administered by local officials, state officials. And it sounds like there's been really important investments in hardening the computer infrastructure against intrusions like the kind that we've seen in 2016 and again in 2018. So I think it's important to give the American people some assurance that those investments have been made and that they can have confidence that there's been a good hard review of what happened and some important lessons learned. I think the other questions around whether, it's this president's comments of last week have generated which is a reiteration of something he said earlier in the year, where he refused to say whether he would acknowledge the outcome of the election if it appeared that he had lost, has raised some doubts, unfortunately. But I think the bottom line is, we've been doing this now for more than 240 years. The American people can have confidence that we have experience doing this, that 240 plus years of uninterrupted transitions is not going to be, interrupted this year. And the best way to ensure that is to make sure that people have a plan to vote, whether you're voting by mail, voting absentee, or voting in person, or voting early. You have a plan to vote and you go out and do it. And I like to say that the president has been good for civic participation in the country. Midterm turnout in 2018 was the highest it's been in more than 100 years. I think we can anticipate record numbers of turnout for the presidential election this year, and it would be a shame if we cut short the process and didn't let people ensure that they got their votes counted. And at the end of the day, I think that's what's going to happen.
Okay. Paul?
Yeah. So I'll go in the reverse order. I am not worried about a peaceful transfer of power. There will be a peaceful transfer of power, and it will happen on January 20th, no matter what the election result is. And I'm really not personally concerned about that because the institutions still work. On election integrity, Dennis and I did collaborate back in 2016 on this. We were attacked, and so much has been done since then to harden our infrastructure at the state level and to have Homeland Security detect, interfere, and help collaborate with the states to make sure that we don't have an interference in our software or our hardware that conducts elections. So, excuse me, I'm confident the integrity of the election mechanical process is going to be taken care of and secure. There's going to be, if elections, if judges open the polls well past the deadline with mail-in ballots, that's going to be an issue that Republicans will cry foul on. So that if the courts try to change state election laws and procedures, that is where you'll see the Republican side really cry foul. So in my opinion, the best thing is just follow the state laws and conduct the elections how they always conduct their elections, and we'll be just fine. And I think people accept the results, and I don't think, and I can't speak for the president, but I think the common voter will accept the results. In Wisconsin, we have a good system. We have absentee ballots, which you don't have to prove you're gone. You can just get an absentee ballot. We have early voting. We have in-person registration. The system works well. We have very, very little fraud of anything to speak of. We have some allegations that pop up, but they're pretty small. So I think we have a pretty good system in my state, and I think most states would probably say the same about theirs. It is just if courts at the last minute try to change the way elections are conducted in particular states, that's where you're going to have a real hue and cry. But as far as the integrity of the elections and the hacking that is going to come, let's just say theoretically from Russia, I think we're well guarded against that. So I'm pretty confident we're going to be okay.
Thank you. After all, what is realistic to expect from the next president, whoever it is, who will be facing a precariously divided and angry nation? Will it be possible to get things done for the American people in this context? Mr. Speaker, let's start with you this time.
Yes, the answer is absolutely yes. And believe it or not, I mean, when Dennis and I worked together in our last positions, we did a lot of things together. We put together plenty of deals. And we had to accept things from the other side that we didn't want, but we got things done. My last term as Speaker, which was 2017 and 2018, we passed 1,172 bills out of the House. That's about double what the House usually produces. And more than half of those bills made into law. So 600, give or take, bills made into law, and 80% of those bills were bipartisan. So even in 2018 and 2017, 80% of the laws we wrote were bipartisan bills. And I would guess, just when Dennis was there, 2015, 2016, he had to have bipartisan bills because we had divided government, and we got a lot of things done. We did the Cures Act in lame duck. We did so many different things. So even in these partisan, polarized times, the thing I keep telling people is, you turn on your computer and you turn on the TV, and you're probably in some self-reinforced echo chamber, like Fox or CNN or Drudge or Huffington Post, and you just see the controversy of the day, the outrage of the day. But underneath that is still a Congress that can collaborate, that can work together, that does get things done. Presidents and leaders, speakers and majority leaders can make a big difference on that, no two ways about it. But the system and the institutions still do work, and bipartisan things still get done. It would be much nicer and much better for everybody in the country, for sure, if we could try to depolarize the environment and just get the better of our angels coming more closely together. But I just want to say, even in these hyperpolarized times, the system works and bipartisanship still does occur.
Good. Dennis, do you share that outlook?
I do, and I just would say that I always appreciated the working with the speaker. He always had kept an open line, always heard my arguments, always heard the president's arguments, more importantly. And I joke with him, he likes the worst football team in the country, but other than that, we grew up in very similar situations, not far from each other, him and Cheeseland and me in Minnesota. So in the main, we understood that the challenges the country faced. I think the next challenge, the principal challenge facing the next president, is being able to execute on what you want, making sure that your promises to the American people are met with outcomes. I think that's the challenge that we face from Washington, which is a Washington that seems disconnected from people's concerns or people's challenges. And if whether it's a reelected President Trump, which obviously would not be my preference, or an elected President Biden, which is a little closer to my taste, I think the real challenge is making sure that you get execution on your promises. And at the end of the day, it's really hard to get execution on your promises without some kind of cooperation from the other side. And so that requires communication. It requires, as the speaker suggested, the informed consent of the American people. And I think the best way to get that is to make sure that we, as consumers now of information, recognize that, foreign intelligence services, others are trying to influence how we see public affairs and how we see one another. And that's fully within our, it's one thing that you talk a lot with the students about, Scott. I know that I do, and I know the speaker does, which is they need to be informed consumers of this information too, and recognize when they're getting spun by a foreign government, and recognize when somebody's trying to divide us as a country to advance their interests and to obviously take a chunk out of ours. And so, it still works. I'm proud of the things that we did together with a speaker. And I think there's a lot the country needs to get done, and it's going to require that kind of cooperation.
So here's a related question about bipartisan collaboration. Both the Keough School and our Global Policy Initiative and Notre Dame's Wilson Chian Lab for Economic Opportunities, both these units place a high premium on evidence-based, data-driven policymaking. Speaker Ryan, you and Democratic Senator Patty Murray passed a bipartisan bill into law that seeks to promote evidence-based policymaking by increasing access to data and research in the context of policymaking. So I'll ask both of you, but I'll begin with you, Paul. Is there hope that fact-based, evidence-driven policymaking might provide a platform going forward for more frequent and effective cross-party collaboration? And let me just add this: why did we need a bill for this? I mean, I would assume that a lot of legislation and policymaking is already evidence-based.
No, it isn't.
It isn't. So tell us about that, and whether we can bring the parties together on that platform.
So you're scratching one of my big itches, so I'll try to give you as quick an answer as I can. I won't talk like a senator and speak forever. But as a joke we house guys say. So I got the idea for this commission from Jim Sullivan at Leo years ago. And the reason was, I'll back up for a moment. I got a little tired of the fact that we were trying to solve some problems, say in the poverty space, and we kept having just these ideological battles and fights, and we would go to stalemates. So nothing would get done because the left and the right would just fight each other to a draw, because we basically use ideological arguments to try and prosecute our point, and we could not reach consensus. So I tried to take a step back, and I witnessed 1% of the programs that the federal government were designed using evidence, as we describe it, using data and evidence. And I spoke with an economist guy named Raj Chetty at Harvard who walked me through this amazing study he did on upward mobility. And he more or less happened into data from the Internal Revenue Service to do this really path-breaking study, in my opinion. I went to Notre Dame and I spoke with Jim Sullivan and Bill Evans and some others at the time, saying, why don't we have more studies like this? And what they basically walked me through was, because nobody can get this data. That was a one-off. There ought to be a commission to release all this government data in a privacy-compliant way so that researchers can measure the effectiveness of our public policies. So I called my friend Patty Murray, who she and I had done a budget agreement a year or two earlier with Dennis, actually. I don't know if you were chief then or not. I think you were.
I was, yeah.
Yeah, so I did a deal with Patty, and she and I became friends. So I called Patty and I said, look, here's what I want to do. I want to do a commission to release all of this data, and we should just agree, you're a progressive, I'm a conservative, that this is nothing but good, because we'll actually find if these policies are succeeding or not, and then we can basically affect policymaking, kind of leach the ideology and the partisanship out of it, and just go where the data tells you to go. And I believe my principles will be validated by data, and if they're not, I'll have to rethink my premises, perhaps. So she agreed. We did a commission. The commission met. It gave us these findings on how to release this data. We took those findings, put it in legislation, passed it into law. It just became law last year, and it has now helped create what I would call a new scope of social political science on evidence-based policymaking. And our theory and hope here is, and Notre Dame really is the leader in this, Leo in particular, just to put a little plug in for Leo, is the leader in this, which is we can now move toward evidence-based policymaking following data and analytics, random clinical trials to see what works and what doesn't, and go with what works and leave what doesn't work. And I really believe it's going to help bridge ideological and partisan gaps to bring solutions. And I'd like to think this is sort of a new version of political science that will help get us toward consensus. And so that was our entire motivation in the first place. It's just taking root. OMB is doing it. Lots of universities are doing it. So I'm very, very optimistic. And it's what my foundation basically is dedicated toward doing. The American Idea Foundation, my personal foundation, in addition to the work I do at Leo, is dedicated toward making sure that this law is properly executed.
Thank you. That was both senatorial and interesting. So thanks for that combo. No, thank you. That was very interesting. And Dennis, you want to add to that?
Oh, Scott, just to say that I think it was a really important thing that the speaker did with Senator Murray. And we're doing a little work now with the Gates Foundation and several of the speaker's staff from his foundation, Republicans and Democrats, to try to build on that, to make sure that we have a parallel, effort outside the government to try to send real clear demand signals of the kind of information that would be useful to policymakers, but also then be useful also to individual Americans. Individual Americans make decisions all the time. And wouldn't it be great if they could make decisions informed by some of the good feedback that the speaker is talking about? That if they're making a decision about where to spend their incremental training dollar, where to invest the time that they have to try to develop new skills in this new economy, wouldn't it be great if they could draw on just the panoply of evidence that the speaker and Senator Murray have identified, and that is available to policymakers? That's the desired end state here, which is the informed American individuals being able to make decisions based on the best available information. Another example of that is, look, we just moved a lot of money to families early in the pandemic. And it'd be really interesting to know, of that $1,200 per family, we don't have a good way to know if everybody who needed it most got it. And we should be able to have a better handle on that. We should be able to find people and make sure that they have access to the support that the statute designed for them. And frankly, we just don't even have that. And that's a mistake. And as a result, people suffer more than they should. So I think the speaker and Senator Murray did the country a great service in this. I know that this, not only Leo, but the Keough School is really pushing for policy relevant research that advances the national interest. And, there's many people, I agree with the speaker. Raj Chetty's work is great, but, he's got kind of a sweetheart deal with the IRS and the census.
He did.
And
an exclusive deal.
Yeah. And so why not let's get some of those for our economists at Notre Dame and make sure that
you sound like
everybody
Jim
can use
Sullivan.
it. Exactly.
So, that's right. It was that Raj Chetty example. Raj walked me through what happened and how he got this, and how he is basically the only one who ever got this. I said, well, that's not fair. Let's open this up. And then I realized, oh, well, I better have a commission because this is a big can of worms. And we did it. And the whole point is, let's get all the researchers out there to have access to this kind of data, so we can have 1,000 studies like this that will get us over the sweet spot, which is exactly as you described it, Dennis. Evidence-based policymaking.
Yep.
Thank you both. You've both accomplished or helped to accomplish a great deal in government over the course of your careers.
I think a lot more the speaker, but
this is not the time for humility, Dennis. We appreciate it, but we're going to have to get you to speak up too for all your accomplishments. We don't have time to list all of them for both of you, but I'd like you both to choose one that you're proudest of, perhaps, that you want to lift up, of something you were part of or that you led in government, and what its legacy might be. And then the darker side of that question is, do you feel that legacy is threatened or could be threatened in the years ahead? So the good and the threatening, I guess, is part of the question. What would you pick out that you're proudest of? Let's start with Paul Ryan.
Well, there are a lot of things I did, but I spent 20 years in Congress, almost all of that time on the Ways and Means Committee, ultimately becoming chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, focusing on rewriting the tax code. That was always my goal from the day I got to Congress. And as I saw inversions happening, I saw U.S. losing its competitive edge. We were losing manufacturing, wage stagnation. I really believe passionately in tax reform, and I was able to achieve that in 2017. As a result, you had great wage increases among the bottom two income quintiles. You saw billions of dollars being repatriated back into America because of our territorial system. And our tax rates got back where they ought to be, in my opinion, to be competitive with the rest of the world. And also a good surge in manufacturing, because I think the expensing, I'm a big believer in expensing. It's a tax strategy that gets us closer toward a consumption-based tax. So I really believe, and I know Dennis and his team don't agree with me, but I passionately believe about tax reform. I think we got it about right. The stuff that's expiring are more of the individual items for families. I do think those will get extended, but the stuff that was permanent is more of the business taxation. The one thing that isn't permanent is expensing. I don't think that's too controversial, and I do think expensing will get extended. But of course, all of this could be undone by another Congress and another president. So clearly that could be undone. Joe Biden's promising to do undo a lot of it. I think that would be a grave mistake for the economy, particularly with COVID, but particularly with the international competition we're in. So I'm very proud of the tax reform effort. It was about 25 years. I was Jack Kemp's staff economist before I was in Congress, working on the very same issue. So I put about 25 years in this issue. Obviously, I have strong opinions and a track record on it. So I'm very proud of that effort.
Thank you. Dennis?
Yeah, Scott, there's a lot of things I'm proud of, and to put the New START treaty with the Russians, the remarkable effort to get bin Laden to underscore that America does not forget, and if you're gonna mess with America, we will come and find you, and it may take a little bit of time, but we will find you and you will pay. And then issues like the Ebola response. But the one thing I just want to highlight is, and this I think something we talk with the students about is, you're not going to win an argument you don't make. And so if you go back to the kind of the first pushback on the kind of traditional American program that really started with President Carter and then was really amplified by President Reagan, was the refugee resettlement program in the United States, which I think right now is we hear is the president is thinking about going to zero, even though we've kind of averaged since 1980 about, let's say, about 65 to 70,000 refugees resettled in the United States every year. Well, we had a big dust up after the San Bernardino shooting in California in 2014, 2015, where several governors were saying they weren't going to accept refugees anymore. The thing I'm proud about in that is that everybody thought it was a political loser. We engaged the fight. We had a big debate about it. And none of the governors stuck to their position. We were able to continue the program. As a result, we have a lot of Christians from the Holy Land. We have a lot of, Turkic, Uyghur people from China. We have a lot of other religious minorities who have been threatened, who were able to be resettled in the United States and contribute here. So not only to escape the violence that they faced at home because of what they believed, but they're now able to contribute here in the United States. At the end of the day, that's a function of the president not backing down on something he believes in. And so I guess that's what I'd say I'm most proud of, Scott. And there's evidence of that every day in every office and every building in Capitol Hill and throughout the administration. And I guess my continued hope is that the students that the speaker and I get to work with go out there and continue doing it, because I think the Notre Dame students have a lot to offer that.
Thank you, Dennis. Okay, time for a lightning round. We've got a little less than 10 minutes left. And so I'm going to go through three major policy issues and ask about your approach to each. If you were in charge, how would you approach this topic? And give you 1 minute each. So that's not senator, that's not congressperson, that's not even a journalist asking it. You got to get 1 minute. So let's start with this one. Fighting poverty and the growing inequality between rich and poor. Democrats and Republicans generally disagree in their respective analyses and prescriptions for these social and economic challenges, including how big the challenges really are and who should address them. So how do you approach the issue? What are we likely to see going forward in a second Trump administration or Biden presidency? Only in 1 minute. Start with Paul.
1 minute, okay. And now my college professor, you want me to do this in 1 minute? Okay. All right. You got to have economic growth. No two ways about it. So you have to start with strong economic growth. Then you got to have education reform and a focus on upward mobility. I think there's a lot of good things we've done lately, criminal justice reform, others, more work to do there. So economic growth, education reform, and then I think in the poverty space, I'm a big believer in what they call sort of navigation wraparound benefits. So there's a particular strategy. Catholic Charities really does a good job on this, of getting people up and out of poverty, attacking poverty at its root causes. There's a lot of evidence on how best to do that. A big surge of effort there, in my opinion, is where we ought to go. So economic growth, education reform, which is secondary, education, skills training, and K through 12, and good poverty strategies. Go talk to the guys in Leo. I'm out of my minute.
Okay, thank you. But I'll give you 30 more seconds to say, do you expect those things to happen in the next administration, whether Trump or Biden?
Economic growth obviously is going to be a priority of either administration. They'll differ on how they want to achieve that, but that's really important. You cannot have jobs and higher incomes and wage mobility if you don't have high economic growth. And we're going to have a really ugly economy for a while. So that's going to be job number one. We have rolling out at the state level, because of some federal reforms we passed, post-secondary education. That's got to be prosecuted so that you can get 2-year degrees in skills training. On the poverty stuff, there's a lot of work that remains there. And I'm hoping either whoever wins goes with evidence-based on poverty. And I think we have hopefully leapfrogged the partisanship of it.
Thank you. Dennis.
Yeah, Scott, I as the speaker says, this question about wraparound services, you got people who are trying to balance a lot of different things as they're trying to develop new opportunities to get jobs that pay and that have some path of upward mobility. I think number one on wraparound services, you have a whole question of family leave, support for childcare, any number of things. But number one has got to be healthcare. And people got to be able to have some confidence that their kids are getting taken care of, that they're getting taken care of. And that's got to happen in an affordable way. So that's number one. And number two is that we have to make sure that work pays. And so I think the speaker highlighted this question of wage softness. We just have to make sure that work pays. And we have just too many people making money off of their money, and we're treating that as a tax matter differently than people who are making money off of their work. And I know the speaker disagrees with me on this one, but I do think we have to get back to an economy that really values work and the dignity of work. And I think that I think the vice president will make a big push on this. And absent some reinvestment in that social contract, I think we're going to continue to see a lot of the increasing polarization that's coming from this question, this enhanced inequality that we've seen growing now for some time. And if we don't get our hands around that, then I think the whole experiment is really that much harder, if not at risk.
Great, thank you. Round two, you have both tackled immigration reform and the refugee crisis. What are the prospects for immigration reform in either a second Trump term or a first Biden term? And will the U.S. continue to restrict refugee intake in the years ahead? What's your approach? Let's start with Dennis this time, if we could.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just think it's a self-defeating and not in best keeping with the traditions of this country to zero out the refugee resettlement program, as I suggested a minute ago. The president has to make a decision before the end of next week, at the end of the fiscal year, to do this. It would be a mistake. And so I hope, especially given the emerging climate crisis and all the forced migration that we're likely to see as a result of that climate crisis, that I hope that we will maintain our leadership on this question of refugees. On immigration reform, I know the speaker spent a lot of time on this too. I think, bigger is better here. The fact is that my grandparents are one that gotten in here under some of the rules that the president now is advocating. I think that is also self-defeating. And so I hope to see a big immigration package. It might be forced on us by this climate migrant challenge, And it's best, I think, in all cases for us to get ahead of this and to take care of the 11 million people who are here now in the shadows and figure out a way through, the Dreamers, through all sorts of other packages to make sure that we maintain the historic American commitment to migration.
Thanks, Dennis. Paul?
Yeah, so there are two big policy regrets I have in my career. Two things the big ones that got away: entitlement reform and immigration reform. I put a good 20 years on this issue. Dennis and I used to talk about this. Frankly, we got really close with Dennis and the President Obama. We were going to bring a bill after the July recess, and Eric Cantor lost his primary, and it blew us up on our side. So we got so close at a few times. I brought a bill to the floor in July of 2018. Which the Friday before the Tuesday vote, I had the votes. Come a tweet and a couple of other things. Come Tuesday, I didn't have the votes. So, we've gotten very close on immigration reform. We have to reform our immigration laws. They're broken. I agree with Dennis, by the way. We should not zero out the refugee resettlement program. I think the asylum laws need to be tightened, but I think the refugee resettlement program. I grew up with my parish and all the parishes in my hometown sponsored Laotians. They're great guys. I love them. They're guys I grew up with. It's a really cool system. I mean, it's a thing that America should always do. So I agree with him on that. You had to fix our immigration laws. I really do believe they will be fixed by the next president, whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden. We got close a couple of times. It's going to happen. I really believe that. And let's just say Trump gets reelected. I do believe that there is a deal to be gotten there that does give the Dreamers, who aren't going to leave, shouldn't, a pathway that does fix a lot of these problems. I really think that's possible. And I know Joe believes that. The question is who's running Congress and what's happening there. Even in a bipartisan divided government, I do think a deal can be gotten. Issues like this don't break until the time is right. Regrettably, it wasn't right the 2 or 3 times I made a crack at it. I do think it will be right very soon in 2021, 2022, because the system's basically breaking.
That's encouraging to hear that you see a way forward there. Round 3, quickly, is there a path forward to break the impasse over effective solutions to climate change? Mr. Speaker, let's stay with you for now.
Yeah, technology to me is the way to go. What I think the problem with this debate is it is often posed as: do you either want to support the environment and guard against climate change, or do you want economic growth? We should not have to choose between the two of those things. So the reason people like me don't support certain strategies is because we think it's going to do a lot to hurt the poor and hurt the economy. So there are things out there we can do: research, R&D, innovation, that can be good for the economy and good for the climate. I think we get fusion energy. We get pre-processed nuclear energy, so you have no nuclear waste. Game changer. Look at what batteries are doing these days. Solar is so much better than it was just 6 years ago. So I think innovation is the secret, and we can do this in a way without damaging the economy and hurting the people who have nothing but disposable income, the poor.
Great. Dennis?
Yeah, look, I think we are going to have to do it, both because the science is and real life is showing us the very profound impacts of climate change. I said a minute ago with this question of climate migration, but we're watching the hottest wildfires, earliest wildfire season in the West in a long time, that every indication is that it's going to go for some time. We're watching more extreme weather events on a regular basis. And if it's not that forces it, it's going to be young people, Republicans and Democrats, saying it's time to fix this. And so, I feel like we made good progress. You see low carbon energy sources like wind, solar, have gotten very competitive with, in fact, much more competitive with dirty sources of energy. And I think that, this is going to be a race to innovation. And I think the country that breaks this open is going to be the country that benefits most. I think that should be us. That's traditionally been us. I think it's astounding that it's not us now. In fact, it's not just astounding, it's frustrating. And look, I think that the next president is going to have to get serious about this. And yeah, I think technology is part of it, but we're going to have to recognize that this is a challenge that we can't wait for new technologies. We have to start deploying proven technologies now. And I think there are plenty of those to deploy. And when we do, I think that we'll kind of reassume the United States position on global matters, and we won't be, watching the Chinese get kudos as we did last week on something like this, which just not a position the United States should find itself in.
Gentlemen, it has been a very rich 50 minutes and 32 seconds. Before I let you go, could you give us just a word on what you're up to now? And I know you're up to a lot, you're doing a lot, but if you lift up one of the issues you're working on now. Professor McDonough, let's begin with you.
Well, Scott, I work for a really good dean. He presses us hard, but he's a decent guy. And he's looking for outcome, best value for the students, and that's you. But that's one thing I'm doing, do some other things. But the principal thing I've got conviction on and I'm focused on, Scott, is this question of refugees and how we handle the movement of massive amounts of people over the course of the next 20, 30, 40 years is going to determine whether this experiment with democracy in the West and representative government works. And we've gotten over big challenges like this in the past with American leadership, and I have every confidence we'll do it again. But we're going to have to get serious about it, get intentional about it. And I feel like we're losing a little bit of time.
Thank you, Dennis. We're pulling for you on that. Mr. Speaker.
I too work for a great team, a guy named Eric Sims over in the economics department. He replaced Bill Evans, and Bill was happy to hand that gavel over to him. We say gavel, sorry. I don't know if you guys use gavels as chairman of departments or not.
Don't give him any ideas.
Yeah, right. So I'm also a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. It's a think tank in Washington. And I've got some pretty specific projects there that I'm working on, a poverty project, an entitlement reform project. And I have a charitable foundation myself, run out of Janesville, Wisconsin, called the American Idea Foundation, focused on making sure the Evidence Act is well executed, and a number of other issues, all focused on, I guess, what I would call center-right, market-based poverty solutions. So those are my vocational things. I do the speaking circuit like anybody who just retires, like any recovering politician, and support work as well. But all my vocational stuff are basically spread between Notre Dame, AEI, and our foundation.
Paul Ryan, Denis McDonough, thank you for this time. We know how precious it is, and for being our colleagues on the faculty at Notre Dame. We look forward to future conversations. Good to see you.
My pleasure. Great being with you guys.
Thank you. We hope you'll join us once again next month for a conversation with Arvind Krishna, CEO of IBM, to be moderated by Marilyn Miranda, the Charles and Jill Fisher Provost of the university. And again, thanks to Paul and Dennis for making the time to join us this evening. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. Good evening.